What's going on, Coding Rabbits? My name is Sean. Welcome to a very special episode of Live Coding with RabbitWerks JavaScript. We are here at the Vue.MN Meetup. We got a whole crew with us today, so I'm stoked to be doing a talk on this custom directives. So basically, let's just talk really quick about what's a directive. Directive in Vue is basically like a no. Yeah. Okay, so basically what directives are in Vue are micro functions that you can place inline on DOM elements and stuff to have some sort of action affect that element. So for instance, the basic ones that we use pretty much regularly, like von, vif, v4, von to check a conditional, or I'm sorry, von for a click listener, v4 to generate loops of elements and stuff like that, just based on a certain condition. Jeez. So there's like 8 or 9 directives built into Vue, and we can also write our own custom directives. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So what I can do is I'm just going to make let's see. Actually, I'm going to spin up a new PM, or I'm sorry, Vue create. So has anybody written any custom directives before or used them at all? So, I mean, they definitely have a ton of stuff. I'm sorry, I'm sweating bullets up here. So they have a number of them that you probably use on a regular basis in Vue if you've ever written any type of single file component, stuff like that. Basically, you have the ability to write your own using the global Vue prototype. So what that'll look like, and I'm just going to write and we can keep all of our custom directives folder or this file. This might try this. Okay, so this is a project I'm working on in a live stream series that I'm doing for full stack auth from scratch, and it's not super important what the concept of it is, but we just want to be able to get the project up and running without having to. Let me spin it up really quick, and then we'll start writing some directives. Pull it around a little bit. Yeah. Well, it's just, it's what it is. Okay, so I'm going to spin up this project really quick, and I gotta create a file. Call it Directives. I mean, you can also do this in line and in single file components and stuff like that too, but if you have multiple custom directives that you want to write, then kind of having them in its own file is nice for code maintainability. So this is kind of what we got, just like a basic login page or whatever. So this is the example. Okay, so the first thing we want to do before we can start actually writing directives is we need to give this file access to Vue. So we do that by importing Vue, just like you would normally into a JS file. Yep. Okay. So okay, so we import Vue, right? And this is telling me. Okay. We import Vue, right? And now we can start accessing it. So the way we go about, okay, so let's do something really basic. We have a bunch of inputs on this web page. Let's make it that for like when this element, like for instance, this username input field gets loaded, we want to be able to, let's say, focus on it right away. So we'll write a directive called focus. And this is like one of the basic examples that they have for writing custom directives on the Vue docs. So we'll just go off of that for right now, and then we'll see where we can go from there. Okay, so we can start by just saying Vue.directive, just like that. It's a function on top of inside of the Vue object, global Vue object. So whenever we write a directive like this, it's going to be globally accessible throughout the entire application that is Vue. So there's two parameters that we have to send in, and first is the ID, which is the name, and it's going to be a string, and we'll call it focus. Second parameter we want to pass in is going to be the actual options. So options object, and there's a couple of, let me just pull up the docs so I can make sure. I was looking at this all week, but no. Yeah, okay, so basically what happens inside of here is this, when we have this directive on an element, it's going to run a certain different lifecycle hooks, essentially. Directives have different lifecycle hooks inside of their own thing, so hook functions, basically you have bind, inserted, updated, component updated, and unbind. Basically the one you're going to be using most of the time is either inserted or component updated. Update, you can use that one as well, but the reason or the issue with this is that children elements or children components might not be updated, so it could cause issues. Component updated is will basically run after all of the vnodes and of its children have. So bind is just a one-time function that gets called, so we could set it up on that too. Usually I do work with like inserted because that's when it gets inserted into, or when the element is inserted into the DOM, essentially. So we'll go with that. And if you remember what lifecycle hooks are, they're essentially methods, empty methods that run at certain points throughout a code process. So you'd have like a start and an end lifecycle kind of, start, middle, and end lifecycle kind of thing. And so the way we can hook into these is just simply inside of this options object, we can just call it just like this. So inserted will be a function that I think we function. Inserted. So, okay, the next thing we want to do is we got to make sure that we're passing in, there's a couple different parameters that we get available to us that we can pass into these lifecycle hooks. The main one that you'll probably be using is L, which gives you access to the actual DOM element that you're targeting. And binding. Binding is the, like, essentially the arguments and everything that gets passed into with the directive. So if we look at like a basic, like we were going to do this and say v4 equals same custom element. Okay, so basically this v4 is going to reproduce this nav bar main 5 times. This is essentially what is the binding and the arguments we can pass into it. So if we look, there's the expression, so that this part of it is the expression of the directive, which for this v4 loop, it evaluates to, you know, how many times we're supposed to render this element out. Let me see if I can get it. So instead of doing it on this page, I'm going to go into the actual login view. Cool. All right, let's duplicate this h1 a bunch. So if we say v different port on the h. This is on 2. We'll see what happens. I have to bring a TV with me this time too. Oh, okay, so there we go. You can see that this v4 it duplicated login 5 times, and this is based on the expression that we passed into this. Some directives don't necessarily need any type of expression or anything like that, but you can get really complicated in doing all this stuff. So vtext, or not vtext, v-once is one of those directives that you don't need. You don't pass in any type of arguments to it because it's just essentially it says that it's only supposed to render this element once, and then it doesn't touch it after. So there's a whole plethora of stuff that we can do with this and make it really interesting. Obviously this is just a v4. If I wanted to do like a Boolean thing, so if I'm doing like v show equals false, then it takes it away, right? Because of what this evaluates to. V show evaluates to either true or false. If we were going to do, you know, we could pass in some sort of method into this, or some sort of data property from down here in our Vue component, and based on that, and evaluate it, and basically the same thing as if we're passing in a hard-coded value into that. So it's really flexible on what you can do with it. So let's do this focus one. So we're going to attach the focus onto this this username, right, or the form thing, and we need to pass into our directive the element that it's attached to. So if we go like this, console log L. And if we go ahead and put this directive on, let's see, put base right here. So this is where the username is living. If we go and put that directive on it, and it will be, so when you write a new directive, you notice how all the directives in Vue, they have that v dash prefix and whatnot. So when we write a directive like this, we don't need to do v dash. That's something that's automatically implied or in Vue, so it's thought that if you have a directive, it's you're telling Vue that you have a directive based on the v dash prefix or whatever. So we don't have to write that in our actual names because that gets appended to the front of it automatically. So login page, and if we put this v focus, there we go. Let's see what we. So yeah, I think it's so tricky when you go back and forth between like mixins and directives and stuff. I'm really looking forward to the yeah, according to docs, you don't exporting because you're essentially adding this onto the Vue object. Let's see. Like if instead of the element, yeah, I mean it's running because it gave us the error, but it's not. Too many screens. To resolve direct. Well, that's what this is what it is right here. This is where we pass it in. Element gets generated based on what element it's put on. Try just writing function. It's like verbatim for the docs, and it's not working. Directive, focus, inserted. Shorthand. I don't know. Strange. I wonder if it's something. Okay, so that's what I'm missing right there. We got to bring the directives into the this error is because it's trying to reach out to my. So, okay, cool. Yeah, that's what I do for a living. Yeah, so it's really tricky because like it's confusing because so like the router in the store you got to pass into the actual main Vue object, but like directives and mixins and stuff like that you don't have to. So to be honest, I'm gonna be glad when the mixins are gone and have over to the compositional API. It's gonna be very nice to work with. Okay, so we got that going. Let's go back to directives and see what's going on here. So let's just. Can't really tell that it's focusing. I think I did. Let's see what it is. Okay, so it does give us the, oh, we're on the input group. That's why it's not focusing on. What I need to do is take this and go into actually, that's not going to work because this is a reusable component. Let's go to the button. So I put it on one component. It's going to try and run that directive on all of the instances of the form input. Focus. Okay, so you can kind of see it if you look closely at the button. You can see that it hit refresh, auto focuses. So that's a very basic directive. One thing that I've done in the past is instead of doing like a focus directive. So that can be nice for having that functionality. I mean, just write. There's multiple ways you can focus an element without doing a directive. But one thing we can do in, whoops, I'm going to keep that on console log. It's going to write a new one and we'll call it Vue directive. We'll say color. This is second parameter is the options object. And then we're going to hook into the inserted hook and write our function. And this one is going to get L as well passed into it. And we can just say L.style color equals DADA55. Badass green. Selling me property of lint. All right, so let's see. If we attach this, we should be able to change the color of this button when the component loads. And directives aren't necessarily always used for when just the components load. Like I've done I was you guys. I've written some Vue directives, custom directives for working with or applying flex classes to elements and stuff like that. So I can just set like, you can actually pass in an entire object into directives and get access to properties inside of that and use it all in code. So it's pretty powerful. All right, so we have vFocus. Let's add this vColor to it now. All right, it looks like it changed. Kind of hard to tell. It's div. It's the entire. Can't really tell. Let me try and put it on something that's a little bit. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I should not be. This is going on. Instead of color, I want to. Because it's right now it's changing the text. I just want to change the back. Now, say vColor. There, changed. Just like that. So, I mean, that's kind of like some really basic examples if we wanted to go a little bit more depth. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that you can do in here. And at certain points, it's like if you're writing really long and really complicated directives, it's probably better to abstract that out, refactor it out into like some sort of like function that you can call, versus having it be in a directive. Because directives will run other than like once direct time that crashes. Or unless you have it set up in like inserted or something like that. But usually what I would do is if I'm like a component updated, then something that's super taxing, super demanding, then I won't. I'll decide then whether if I want to extract it to an actual function or not. Because directives are meant to be really small, kind of like helper functions inside of your code, inside of your HTML, inside of Vue. So let me try, let's just see if we can get flex one. See the okay, so let's do, we'll add a modifier or an argument to okay, so here's my thought. We're gonna make a flex directive really quick and just be able to adjust the flex amount based on the value we passed into the directive. So let's start by, we say Vue.directive, again, pass in the string of the name of the directive we want to do, and then we're going to have our options object. So what we can do at this point is we can say component updated. Oops. And this one we're going to hook into binding as well. And this is where we're going to get access to the arguments and stuff on the other side of the equal sign of the directive that we will be using. So let's, not going to be in login anymore. What we'll be in is the, all right, this one. So, which again, this is a reusable component. So when we add a directive onto this, it's going to adjust both of the var items, which is fine for now. Just something to keep in mind. And reusable components. Okay, so we'll do flex on this. Right now it doesn't do anything, but if we, we'll just say we'll pass in 2 for now. So this is the argument that we're passing in, or argument modifier that Vue can use. And so we will say l.style.flex equals binding and dot arguments, I believe. Oh no. So arguments is when you have a directive that has a colon appended to it and then a property on the next side of it. What we want is expression. So, expression. So what this should do is should target the element that it's applied to. It's going to attach or adjust the style, the flex amount of that style of that element, and it's going to set it to what we passed into our expression binding value. So if all goes according as planned, we should have inserted this one, because if we'll say inserted on this one again, because if we update something, then we'll use the updated and I think these actually have some styles. Let's see what's going on. Log. Let's see what that is. We have, this is the directive object that it gives us if we console log binding. Essentially, you can see that we have a number of different things in here, including our expression. I don't know if this dot value needs to be in there. Probably what's. Yeah, okay. So you can see the nav bar nav items drastically increased in size because they're taking up 2 parts of the available space for each item. If you've worked with Flexbox before, it's essentially a ratio kind of thing. Get a certain amount of space and you can divvy up those by saying, like, I want this element to take 3 parts of the available space, this element to take 1 part of the available space, and then the rest of the elements can take up the remaining space, essentially. And it's like amazing for responsive design and development, stuff like that. If we take a look at this, you can see, okay, again, we have our expression in there, so we can change this if we wanted to actually set something like during I already did a live stream on this project. So let's see. Instead of navigating, just wanted to try and do something like add some data to our object. and adjust these values of the flex sizes dynamically, right? So navigate view. Let's first start by adding our data object. And when you're writing single file components, usually it's best to practice to, especially with Vue 3 coming out, best practice to bring in your props as soon as possible. So like first, instead of having like data or anything like that first, because Vue wants to evaluate all the props before it looks at anything else, ideally for the optimum running situation for it. Okay, so let's see, flex amount is 1. And what we can do now is just pass this into the expression for our vflex directive. So we'll see flex amount. So now it should go back down to 1. Well, I guess it's the same thing. Both get the same. That's what I'm talking about with reusable components. Let's try putting it on. Just because I want to demonstrate the dynamicism of it. Yep, I know. Let's try this one more time. Data is a function that returns a new object. Does anybody know what that's called? When you have a function that returns something new, object. Yeah, factory function. God, gold star. Okay, flex amount. Yeah, flex amount 1, so now probably just errors. It's so I think this has some styling. Just wanted. In here. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is just adjusting the flex amount because I'm using my Flexbox library or what a class library that instead of actually using styles, coded styles, because it's easier. So I'm just trying to work around. Flex amount 1. Change this to 2. Something screwing up display. It's not being applied. It's in there. Flex amount. Oh, we might need to actually do value now. See this, if we look in this object, you can see the expression, it says a string reference to flex amount, and then it has a value down here containing the expression. I think that's what's going on here. So let me just go back to the directive and use this to say, again, dot value. Oh, you know what? Actually, I think it's just dot value. All right, so we got it rocking on that. So let's see if we, yeah. Yep. Well, so because we're not passing in a hard-coded value to the directive here, we're not directly passing in a hard-coded value here. So this is kind of the issue that I was running into before. We had 1 in there. I was trying to pull the value out of it, but since this is a hard-coded value, it doesn't evaluate, or for whatever reason behind the scenes, it doesn't work the same way. I don't think. Let me see. Yeah, no, because it would be, if this was 1, then it would be smaller. So when we pass in like some sort of data or something that needs to be actually evaluated, some sort of expression that needs to be evaluated, then to get the returned value of that expression, we need to tag on the dot value, or go about the, because if we look in the at the right here, so this is the directive object, and right now we're passing in the actual hard. So you can see that it has a value in here that it can use. I actually think that probably just keep the value. But if we pass in flex amount again, then obviously when it tries to run it, it's going to, flex amount is just a string at that point, so it doesn't know what to do with it. So if we target the actual value that it evaluates to, the return to value. It's a lot of playing around and stuff like that too, kind of like some quirks, especially when you get into the modifiers and whatnot. Like if we were going to say foo right there, so we tag on a argument to it. Look at the object, you can see that it gets passed into arguments here. So if this had a value to it, then you can do a ton of different stuff with it. I mean, it's really about what you need to get done. And so what I want to see, we're back in. This is why I have like 3 because I can't do it. Oh, here actually. Oops. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so now all these are flex items. You can see they take up all the same available space. But if we go back to our brand, flex amount is a value that is stored in our data property. Let's write a quick method that we can increase that based on a click. Actually, we don't write a method. Let's do it in. So say VON, so another directive. And VON actually has that shorthand, so the @ sign for VON. Say @ and the name of the event we want to listen for. And if we say flex amount ++. So when we click on this brand, it should get bigger, maybe. I think it needs to be on the updated. Yeah. So this is just applying the style when it gets inserted. What we need to do now is go to component updated and basically write the same thing. So that way when it updates, it'll update the style of it. I believe this should work. Yeah, okay. Cool. So yeah, it's on, I like it, it's cool. And we can also pass in full objects into this expression. If we were to pass in like, in terms of what? Oh yeah, they're basically to help make little adjustments and modifications to HTML, your markup and stuff like that. So I mean, you could do like accessibility stuff. You could do internationalization kind of stuff. So you can do all types of stuff. But again, like I said, at some point, like these are meant to be like really basic micro functions that are just kind of like just barely scratch the surface of stuff. If you want to do more complex stuff, you really should be extracting that to some sort of like method or computer property or something like that. Have a little bit more control over it. The directives are, like I said, really to be basic. I usually just do the built-in ones. I mean, I've done the VFlex ones for a couple of things, but again, I have like my own. I can just go like this. Yeah, I mean, what? Like, I think it would be interesting to do. I think it would be interesting to write a directive that actually, like a combination of v4 and if, because right now the best way to do that, they don't really work well together, and it's advised not to do that. The best way to go about getting the same result as a v4 and if bind a directive is just to use a property with a v4, and in the computer property you check against like the values that you do want, something like that. But like, I mean, it's really just there for, and the directives that run, like the built-in directives, so like vmodel, the vmodel and vbind and the on are, we could recreate those using custom directives, but they work a lot differently behind the scenes. The built-in ones work a lot differently than would go about doing it in a custom directive style fashion. So it's really just like another tool that Vue gives you if you want to have that capability. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, does anybody have any ideas of what would be a good use case for something like this after seeing a couple examples? Like anything off the top of your head that you could pick? Thinking about writing your own custom directives? Yeah. There's 1.5 million ways to do everything in Vue, which is nice, but at the same time, like it can be kind of confusing. So it's like not very like set in stone on how they want you to do stuff. Very unopinion. Yeah, they have. If you look at the source code for Vue, they work a little. I mean, it's practically impossible to find the directives actually written out because it's not like you would expect after seeing custom directives. They really like go behind. They go, to very close to the metal when it comes to running their directives. I guess I'm not 100% sure, but all the talks that I've seen and stuff that I've read, they say that especially vModel and vbind are very different behind how they operate versus like recreate. I mean, vbind or vModel, we could actually recreate that fairly easily because you just sit and you would get, so something like if we had a V directive on this, we would just listen for the value, the change in the value, the actual element, and just update that as a data property or something. What I mean, like, or if we had like something we wanted to like bind to, it would basically be like listen for an update on this value and set it to some sort of data property. It's kind of like what Vue does behind the scenes, but it's a little bit different when they do it because they make sure that it actually always current, always, date always has the current value of what you're modeling. Versus trying to do it with a custom directive, it might not always get updated properly or right away and stuff like that. So when you can, I would definitely just use the custom directives or built-in directives for stuff like that, like when it's optimized, obviously. I believe so. Let's see if we can do. Might just actually. Oop, I need to put that inside of a hook. Just trying to remember how he created it. It's a while. I saw it. Drawing a blank. Let's see. It's like it run, right? Because we have two instances of vModel on the page already, because we're using vModel with user and password. So it doesn't look like it overwrites it, and just gets, there's code clashes. So this is actually pretty indicative of what I was just saying, that it's their directives like vModel they don't run and work in the same way as writing a custom directive, because if this were the case, it would have some issues going. Like it would probably break. But as you can see, it's not. Through the custom directives. They just. Oh yeah, and like I said, I've looked at the source code times, and it's not apparent at all how they work. It's not like you would see, okay, here's the section for directives, all the directive functions, stuff like that. It's very convoluted, so it's beyond me. Anyways, what are we doing for time? Wrap it up. Stream is. How well this works, but I do have it on. It's been recording, so I'll post it this evening just to make sure. Setting that way. All right, cool. So I guess that'll conclude our talk on custom directives in Vue. I definitely recommend giving it a shot, doing some basic stuff, especially just like this focus, color, just play around a little bit, because you might end up coming across some moments and realizing where you could use this stuff exactly. Just gotta play around with it, and like I said, I don't really use them all that much, but it's definitely a nice tool to have in your back pocket if you do need something like that. It gives you more possibilities. So, all right, cool. Thank you for tuning in to the video. I know that the stream ended and it just didn't work very well because there's not a good internet to go off of here, but that's all right, and I'll be uploading this video. Still here. Anyways, my name is Sean. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Live Coding with RabbitWerks JavaScript, and remember to stay awesome, keep coding. We'll catch you on the flip side.